Though targeted constantly by the Americans during the war, Kingston was not attacked. From its earliest days, the Point Frederick dockyard built vessels that provided transport services on Lake Ontario for military troops, settlers, and commerce. With poor roads and few merchant vessels on the lake, the service was essential to the early development of Ontario and Canada. Some of the sailors and officers had served in the French Navy before the conquest and contributed a rich legacy of sailing skill specific to Lake Ontario. The Royal Navy came to Lake Ontario in 1813 and assumed control from the Provincial Marine, a small lake fleet under the command of the Army. It was evident that the Americans planned to invade Canada. To succeed, they needed naval control of Lake Ontario. Denying the Americans control of the lake was a crucial mission of the Royal Navy. It was understood that control of the lake would go to the side that had the greatest firepower. Both sides began a vigorous shipbuilding program. The Americans had the advantage since they could find skilled manpower relatively close on the East Coast. The British had more difficulty, since their shipwrights were thousands of miles away. As the ships increased in size and number, more highly skilled shipwrights were required. Critically short at Point Frederick, the building program was saved by the arrival of shipwrights from Lower Canada who had been trained in the Quebec shipyards. Launching the new, more powerful ships required deep water. This was not a problem at Point Frederick, although other harbors on the North Shore were too shallow. The cove at Sackett's Harbor, the site of the U.S. Navy dockyard, was also too shallow. Delayed by this problem and lacking authority to build, the U.S. Navy lost ground in the shipbuilding race. Meanwhile, Royal Navy shipwrights, working side by side with Quebec shipwrights in all weather and without shelter, pulled ahead. After a year of building, on October 16, 1814, the British took control of Lake Ontario with HMS St. Lawrence, 112 guns, HMS Prince Regent, 56 guns, and HMS Princess Charlotte, 42 guns. This ended any chance of an invasion of Upper Canada by the two large U.S. armies near Niagara, and no shots were fired. After the peace, but anticipating a return to war, the British preserved and kept the Point Frederick warships ready for combat. They also continued building. While naval vessels sailed peacefully on Lake Ontario, the American government suggested a plan to remove all warships on both sides from the Great Lakes, which Britain agreed to. Still, concerned about a future conflict, however, the British maintained the naval fleet at Point Frederick. During this interval, construction was underway on the Rideau Canal, a feature that would allow the Royal Navy quick access to Lake Ontario in the event of another war. The strategic success of the canal led to the sharp decline of the Point Frederick dockyard. A standing navy on Lake Ontario was no longer needed, although fears of rebellion led to the return of the Royal Navy in 1838. Royal Marines were called into action soon after, taking casualties. This prompted a Royal Navy gunboat presence on Lakes Ontario and Erie for a few more years, but the promise of demilitarization with the United States was kept, and there was no need for a standing naval force. Warships disappeared from the Great Lakes. The Rideau Canal was utilized for commerce and pleasure boating. The demilitarized border, a direct result of the bloodless Royal Navy victory on Lake Ontario in 1814, led to peace. This remains perpetuated along the world's longest undefended border. The dockyard was closed for many years until the British Admiralty ceded the Point Frederick naval property to the Dominion of Canada in 1870. Since 1876, Point Frederick has been the home of the RMC. In anticipation of the college's opening, most of the old Royal Navy buildings were pulled down, the grounds were beautified, and trees were eventually planted. Several of the old stone buildings were preserved, most built after the War of 1812. One of the buildings that has survived is the Stone Frigate, a limestone storehouse erected following the War of 1812 to hold naval stores. During the interior renovation done prior to the opening of the RMC, it was gutted again and a new interior built. At first, the stone frigate housed the entire college until an education building was constructed. The old blacksmith structure, built in stone in 1815,